that picture right there. And I thought, oh shit, I'm not making anything that good anymore.
All right, so we just started recording.
Yeah.
You had this woman. How long ago did you
Well,
tell you?
and so she just came 2 weeks ago, and she's been given the pots recently.
Uh-huh.
And I was so distressed by the comparison between this and my current work that I busted the givers, and in the sense that it was pretty clear they'd been regifted to her.
Right.
From a long time ago. I said, my God, I haven't made these for 10 or 12 years. I just couldn't stop myself. And
so she brought these pots back, asking if she could get new work.
Yeah. So and she did find some things she wanted. But as Beth said, I ended up trading to get my own work back.
Right. Yes.
I'm not going to give this away. I'm not going to.
You're working on your own Clary Illain collection.
But it was distressing. There's also a big jar that goes with it. It's the same. Got the same treatment by the kiln. They make a nice pair. But why is this better? That damn little electric kiln is gone.
So just visually, thinking about the amount of space you have, it's become this limit on your work, unintentional limit. It's sort of like 25-pound bag of clay is becomes the standard of what you would use instead of having, rolling out this large hill of clay.
And that's that whole conversation between the process. So I immediately, of course, turned around in the studio and made a whole lot of bigger pots. They're in the kiln right now.
Nice, nice. That'll show them.
Yeah.
That'll show
me.
It's you, right? Well, right. I mean, it's so much bigger and so much more lift.
Yeah, and that's also a process. I've always been very lazy this way. That earthenware clay is so dense.
Mm-hmm.
It's not fun to throw. It's fun to decorate, and it's fun to look at in its materiality because it's a wonderful bricky color. But it isn't the joy in lifting and moving. And also, I'm having more trouble with my hands.
Yeah.
So, and shoulders and elbows.
That's interesting. I would have thought earthenware would be really nice and forgiving and throw.
Well, if it's grobbed, maybe.
Yeah.
This has no
No
grob.
problem.
So I'm thinking of changing.
Does it sit back down again when you throw?
It doesn't stretch. It's kind of like pizza dough. It stretches out and twangs back. I mean, it doesn't really do that.
Right.
And I think a lot of it is I'm really losing strength too. And I'm thinking about surfaces to decorate. I haven't been thinking and improvising upon form. I've been thinking and improvising with the decoration. And the form has suffered.
That's interesting, yeah. Well, that's self-critique, right? You're now standing outside of a body of work that you've made, looking back at things you used to make, and figuring out the things you appreciated about those, and wanting to pull them back in.
Yeah. I brought this up, I told you, even though that isn't lit up, is it recording?
I believe so.
Okay. Anyhow, I was telling, Mary Law and Gail about this, and I said, now, I want to talk about this, but I don't want you to offer solutions. Which I think is when you're talking with friends and they're saying, I have this problem, you right away think what's being asked for is solutions. And sometimes...
You want to be helpful.
Well, of course, I do it myself to friends, but I just needed to say out loud, I think this work stinks right now,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and it hurts. That's what I wanted to be heard.
Yeah.
And I didn't necessarily, I can think of things to do about it, but in saying it, it's also trying to summon up energy to make the change.
Right.
Which I think is something, not so much with students, or maybe it is, but with people who've been working for a long time, there is a built-in inertia to change because it involves testing and upsetting your market,
Mm-hmm.
you know, whole bunches of things. It's a different kind of problem from the teacher-student critiquing it.
Right. Right. When we talk about like residencies, or we talk about grad school as this opportunity where you're somehow subsidized such that some of those excuses, those reasons are removed from, you know, I need to make a living, I need to have product to sell. Yeah. It was a revolution. I realized I wasn't testing clay bodies when I started to buy clay from Continental Clay, because the test was a 2,000-pound batch, right? And that's not a test anymore. That's a commitment.
Yeah.
And then I talked to them, and they said they were able to mix up like 300-pound batches of whatever I wanted. It wouldn't be pugged, it wouldn't be de-aired, but they could throw it in a mixer and yeah, much like back to grad school. So now, again, just that removes that pressure.
I think that it really happens, particularly with vessel makers, that the process start driving the final product rather than the final product driving the processes. If that makes any sense.
Say that again. That would.
Well, it's both a strength and a weakness. That what you're trying to do is, given a certain clay and wheel and glazes, you're trying to find the best voicing for that.
Right.
But even if it is the best voicing, it's like your students saying these are representative of me in a way, but they're not representative of some place you want to go to. You know, and so it's really hard to break the momentum of the ways that the studio practice starts dictating so much.
It does. In a way that can be subversive, that you don't necessarily see. Like you're talking about your own work, that you're starting, the form began to be subservient to the object that you want to decorate to get to that point, and so the form started to suffer. But now you're stepping outside, you're looking back at that, and you're reinvesting in that. I think when my studio practice is the best is when the objects come out and give me new ideas to go back into the studio and try something different, new, or just a little tweak on it, or a what if kind of thing where it feels like I'm in dialogue with the process instead of owned by it or limited by it. There's enough feedback and inductive. Like I can throw a monkey wrench in it too, as well as have things come out of the fire that I didn't expect.
You know what I remember vis-a-vis critiquing and you and that period is in your senior, I don't know if it was just a semester or if it was the whole year long, you started to make only cups. And you were working on some clay body firing kinds of problems. You were building up a repertoire of different surfaces. And I remember that I kept pushing you. I didn't understand what you were doing. You also had a concept. You wanted them to be on the wall in a certain way, as I recall. And I kept thinking, oh, he's just trying to make it easy on himself. He's coasting now, And you weren't coasting. I didn't get where it was going to end up.
Right.
And I.
Me either.
Well, I remember feeling badly when I finally got it, which was probably when you put it all together as a show. So I'd probably been writing you all semester. Do you have any memory of that?
I do have some memory of that. Yeah, this is the thing we're talking a little bit about. As an artist, I think. I mean, you're such an influence, and we're such an influence. To have you ride me is good. I mean, it pushes, but I have to push back.
Sure.
Too, right? You know.
Now that I think about it, you were doing some larger vessels too, I think, at the same time.
I had gotten this great critique from Kirk Mangus. It was basically, he identified this major thing that was missing from the pots, which was volume. That they felt that they might as well be solid objects, that they were so much kind of manicured and formed, and from the outside that they didn't have they weren't containers.
Yeah.
And I think that's when I started making some bigger jars and really starting. And cups were a really safe place to start experimenting with that. For me, one of the nice things about clay is it's not precious, right? So that reduces the risk-taking process and removes that as a limit. And cups were a good way to do that, as well as in service to a larger concept.
Well, and as I remember too, you built up a wonderful repertoire of different ways of Sagra firing and slip treatments and stuff like that. So a lot of the things you're doing now, I think, are probably the result of all that experimentation.
They were, and they were also a result of Chuck going on a rampage and saying, no more wood firing until I say so. He felt, like you commented earlier, that wood firing had become a easy answer. Right, like I don't know how to finish this, I'll just wood fire it.
Well, I think lots and lots of work that I see feels like it's all made from the outside in. I mean, it can have exactly the same silhouette, and yet not have that living volume inside of it. It's funny how that happens.
It is. Yeah, Warren and I, when we were visiting yesterday, he was talking about the slow burn of pots, that some of them just, get to them over time, that there's some quality to certain pots that it's really hard to name. It's not just form. Form is just one element. There's a synergy of elements and volume in form that make that it's such good swell, right? It's not silhouette.
Actually, I do see something wrong with that, but
That's the downside of critical analysis is now
I saw it a couple days ago.
Yeah, but you've bitten into the apple. You can't not do it. You've fallen from grace.
Yeah.
It's not all paradise.
Yeah. Well, I did a little fiction writing in the last, I guess it's been about 10 years or so now, and have some 3 sort of novella length manuscripts, and they're just genre fiction, they're mysteries. And boy, if I pull out of the process, it all becomes relative so fast. It all becomes like, who does the world need another mystery? You know, another indifferent mystery writer. It's. I think you gotta stay engaged in the actual process, or you just lose heart. You know, it's really important to be in there manipulating words or clay or whatever. Or you just go on a mind trip that is real self-defeating.
It's self-defeating, pulling back.
The editor takes over.
Oh,
the
yeah.
maker is forgotten, and the editor takes over. And you know, as I say, who do we think we are? I mean, you know, you're not going to write the great American novel. You're going to write the novel you write. And to ask of yourself to write the great American novel is the wrong question.
Right, it's totally cart before the horse,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I think it's important that you're writing for yourself, for the process, for enjoying, for learning, for continuing to live, right? So the hubris of asking, does the world need this?
Yeah. Or how does it rank with all the other
Yeah.
It would be really hard to be a graduate student right now in a good school that exposes you to a lot of what's going on, because you know, the standards, just the skill level and the technical aspects are just a lot of amazing stuff out there.
Yeah. Yeah, and the opportunities and options. You know, 3D printing decals, slip casting, hand throwing, hand building, all the different clay ranges. Yeah, it's not just let me do Content gas stoneware, and what can you do with this palette? And yeah, the bar is raised. Education's paid off in the United States.
I agree.
It makes it exciting, though, too. I mean, I see a sophistication in the work. That's a pleasure across the board to see.
Yeah.
You were commenting earlier, though, that almost, I wouldn't say lamenting, but you were identifying that there were a lot of pots that lacked risk. That maybe that the skillfulness of it.
There's a lot of pretty stuff out there. Not beautiful, but pretty. Just tons and tons of it. And I just have really lost sympathy with that.
Yeah.
I don't even want to say how to make it better, just stop doing it.
Well, we're definitely out of that ugly, rough, you know, crudity. Very few crude pots resonating in kind of our view. There's a quotation that I took learned in high school, and I haven't found specifically who it's attributed to, but ugly can be beautiful, but pretty never. That's always kind of been a long turning of the knife.
Yeah, I've heard that put a slightly different way. Just recently, a friend of mine in his 60s has decided he wants to go to art school, and he's been taking some photographs on his own. And so he went to have a meeting with a teacher in a university setting, and she said, how did she say this? That if you take a beautiful sunset, it's really hard to make art out of it. But if you take something mundane and make it into something beautiful, that's the challenge. Or not mundane, but something that in and of itself is not, wouldn't call on the viewer to say, oh, that's beautiful.
Right.
And I think that's maybe what I'm trying to say about a lot of pretty work. It's just, it is in and of itself has all the elements of prettiness. So there's really nowhere to go from there, unless you add to the mixture something else. That,
right.
I think there are a lot of different ways to push on that, but I don't think people are asking themselves to push on it very much. But mind you, I'm seeing a lot of, maybe first 10 years of a career or something like that work, and it's just maybe not fair to make a whole value judgment on the basis of that.
I don't know, the visibility of work because of social media, I don't know. I know you don't have a website, but we see a lot of, you're right, that early work.
Yeah. Well, in Japan, I saw 2 contemporary exhibitions of Japanese ceramists, and I use the word advisedly because they weren't the folks that are in the traditional pottery vein.
Okay.
They were slick, technically astonishing, and I was totally unmoved by them. Oh my God, they were dreadful, just dreadful. And not dreadful because the skill level or standards were up to it. They were. It was of no interest to me.
I think we get caught up in tech, right? Early on in web page, when people were starting to get web pages, they got caught up in the tech, and so they do text that was flashing, or because they could, not because it was effective or good or communicative or articulate. It was, kind of have faith that overall that those things will prove out, though.
Sure.
Right. Green will rise.
Yeah.
Well,
substance it was invisible back in the day because there wasn't all this exposure of everyone's work on every level. I can only think of one more thing to say about critiquing, which is that I've never found it possible to critique people after they hit a certain level.
Really? Because
I mean, I might have opinions about the work, but I can't. Have people said to you in recent years anything that you found valuable that actually caused you to pivot or make changes?
Partly because I started a new line of work and I was trying to see that. Early on, when I started making pots, I started to get a handle on how to think about pots. Linda Christensen was one of my professors at UGA. She was doing a sabbatical replacement. So I'm having these great studio potters come into academia and were really great teachers. And we just started a habit of asking for a 5-minute critique. And I still ask her, like at St. Croix, hey, will you come over and look at this? Can you give me some feedback on this? So certainly making a new line of work, things have been pivotal in identifiable feedback on that. I asked Jack Troy for some feedback on It's inlay, and I still hold on to what he said. I think with cups and bowls that I'm making, they've gotten, the evolutionary development of those forms is it's not easy to see. The random variation is an adaptation. It's pretty small at this point because they're fitting. Or just narrowing in on phrasing and articulate, but the sentence is fairly clear and articulate. So we're just kind of playing with phrasing or intonation.
Yes.
So you wouldn't see pivotal changes in those work, but as I try and get a handle on new work or a new way to work, or all this hand building stuff like that,
so
really
as you get that feedback, does it tend to be very, very particular in terms of little adjustments, or you don't want that person solving it, but questions that help you develop little adjustments in materials or in very specific formal elements?
Yeah. Well, so you taught us how to drive a critique, right? Ask for feedback that we want.
Yeah.
So is this, I want this piece to be dark and heavy. Is this vertical texture too much lift? Is it taking away from my intent?
Yeah.
Or does the vertical texture what's the effect for you of that vertical texture?
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what I was asking. If it's on that level.
It's often on that level of tweaking. Yeah. Or it could be as broad as, how do you respond to that inlay?
Yeah.
That white line. And it also comes with the knowledge that the person who's giving you the feedback brings their own training and information and perspective into it, and there's a take it or leave it quality for that. I asked Jack Troy, I had this big bowl, dark clay, heavy, and this thin white inlay, bright line, and what his opinion was on that. And he said it felt obtrusive to him, right? Which I asked him, well, what do you mean? And he said it felt like it was like finding a condom in the woods. It's like out of place, right?
Yeah.
It's so stark. But if that's what I want it to look out of place. I want it to be I want high contrast. His feedback is perfect.
You succeeded.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's always, actually you asked me about that inlay.
Yeah, what was it?
Yeah, and I had a kind of, something wasn't quite there about it for me, but it wasn't that I thought it should disappear. I thought that was just, as nearly as I could figure out, there was just something about the actual material and maybe the edges, not the dimensions, but the edge quality to the white line that wasn't quite offering as rich, or I don't want to say rich, that means either as you're working with a mechanical line against this very organic thing, right?
Yeah. So you got contrast there automatically, much less light or dark.
Yeah, but somehow it wasn't all the way there yet.
Yeah.
And I don't know how it could be all there, and I don't know how that's developed, because this was several years ago.
Well, so what's developing is I'm trying to inlay clay instead of a glaze. So it's flush.
Okay.
and maybe I'm playing with texture now because
Yeah.
I can't texture the glaze, but I can texture an inlaid clay.
Mhm.
I'm trying to engineer a clay that will won't not flash,
Oh.
so that you won't get the
So it was-
organic effect of the process seen on it.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, all the stuff that you guys are saying,
Yeah.
I don't know if you'd call it pivotal,
No,
but
but there you get to the problem with words about things, which
Mhm.
is that we can only nudge up to it from a certain direction, and I think what happens with students a lot of times is they get what I said and what Jack Troy said and think that it's somehow in conflict when in fact both of us are trying to drive at something that isn't quite successful yet.
right.
And I think I think that's another thing about critiquing is I think you probably have to stay in control of the situation. You can't have random people coming in. You should be up for that. But anyhow, I think that if you have in your educational life a major mentor or teacher, that probably they should be there when other people are saying things, so that these things which appear to be in conflict can be talked about, because almost always they're not in conflict, so that the critiquers themselves can push it through to a point where everybody knows what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Understands, I should say, what is being said.
Well, there's an element to critique where you're fumbling in the dark.
Yeah.
You're all trying to figure out and dedicated to coming to the same resolution. So it can certainly seem like, what you and Jack were saying were at odds, but yet you're both kind of trying to figure out what's unsettling, and so you're both kind of fumbling around in that space, and I am too.
Yeah.
Joining you in that.
Right.
Like, what is that? It's a lot less subjective than I think we want to believe.
It's subjective, but then when you hit success, we probably would all agree.
Right. Yep, that's it. I don't know what it is, but that's it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Clary.
Yeah. It's fun. I don't get to do this often.
This is
Fun. I miss that about